Welcome to the Tackling Tech Podcast, powered by Dyknow. Join us as we tackle all things EdTech with insightful interviews, actionable tips, and strategies that you can implement in your school or district to make technology integration more effective. Whether you're a teacher, a tech coach, or a technology administrator, we're giving you an advantage in your role by sharing stories from people who are passionate about working with their peers and enhancing the learning experience with technology. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now let's tackle some tech.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tackling Tech, a podcast that shares stories about how you can build better collaboration in K-12 schools. And a show that's dedicated to providing stories about how to effectively operate in a remote learning setting. We are just scratching the surface on developing this platform that educators can come to gather insights during this time. I'm your host, Brett McGrath, Vice President of Marketing at Dyknow, and I'm excited for today's episode and all the episodes we have planned in the future. Just to kick things off, some housekeeping. We have got a lot of feedback, which is fantastic, and it's been really good to start that conversation with listeners. Definitely keep that coming. Having those conversations every week is helpful for us because it gives us ideas on topics that we can share and definitely connections on people who are great to have to come on as Tackling Tech as guests. Would encourage the audience to continue to rate and review. Those are definitely helpful as we're trying to build awareness. We're actually doing a giveaway regarding subscribers. So if you go to dyknow.drift.click/tackling-tech, that's dyknow.drift.click/tackling-tech, and you run through a few questions that we have there. We're giving away a $500 Amazon gift card to an educator that goes through the steps and becomes a subscriber with us. So definitely pumped for that. And we're going to be announcing the winner there on May 1st. You can follow Tackling Tech on Twitter at Tackling Tech Pod. That's probably the best place to get a hold of us. That's where we've gotten a lot of questions and direct messages. We'll get back to you immediately if you reach us there. Also encourage everyone to just visit us at dyknow.com. You can go to our content page. We've got a lot of remote learning content that is in the hopper that I think is awesome, really good, and I'm proud of it. And most of it comes from these types of conversations. We're also putting together a bunch of videos from our online conferences that we are having. Final bit of housekeeping is that we have launched a Facebook group that's the Tech Coach Con Facebook group. It is a private group. You'll have to answer a few questions, but it's a community we're building for anybody in K-12 education who is involved in technology, which my assumption is that's a majority of you listeners. Answer a couple questions, we'll let you in. It's in the early stages, but really excited about the engagement and the conversations that are taking place there. So go visit that. I'm excited about today's episode. Just to give a little story to kick things off. So when I joined Dyknow almost 2 years ago, I was trying to understand and learn trends in K-12 education, most specifically technology trends. And I was spending probably half of my week researching and trying to understand what mattered to educators, what mattered to teachers, to tech coaches and tech admins. And through my research, I tried to jump on the mega trends. And the mega trends are obviously from me as a marketer, video and audio. And I dove into the Apple Podcast Store where you can find Tackling Tech today. And I was just searching for K-12 tech podcasts. And there I stumbled on the TNT EdTech Pod. And the graphic art was cool. It caught my eye. I looked at the episodes before I hit listen, and a lot of the episodes were with people that I had been reading and studying about. And I said, this looks like a cool podcast. I'm going to subscribe and start listening to it. And my assumptions were correct. And just from my research, I have met Scott and Matthew, who are on today's show, who have run the TNT EdTech podcast. They came on to the technology coaching conference and had a session. Scott is a teacher, Matthew's a tech coach. They share a bunch of cool tips and trends on EdTech. I've learned a ton from them. Definitely will make sure at the end of the episode, you know where to find them. But Scott and Matthew, how was that for an intro? Was it good enough for you guys? Was that did I sum up TNT okay?
Oh yeah, that was good. I like that, and I liked hearing the history of how you found us. That helps us as well. And definitely, if you're listening to this podcast, make sure that if you like the content, that you leave a review on Apple. That helps others find the podcast as well.
Yeah, that the review. You have been in the game for a while, and tackling tech is new to the game, and I'm beginning to realize how important those reviews and those 5 stars and all that, how that, important that is to build awareness and get the podcast into more people's headphones. Matthew, how are you?
Doing great. It's exciting to be on here, Brett. Thank you for having TNT EdTech Podcast with Scott and I on your podcast.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun doing the kind of podcast to podcast cross collaboration. TNT EdTech Pod is the first pod on here. Hopefully many more to come, but excited to have you. I definitely want to dig into what's happening at Modesto City. Just for the listener's perspective, we had a call before this, and the one thing I really took away from that call was how the world you're living in and operating in from a remote learning perspective, you guys are very prepared. It's almost like you're on offense when a lot of other districts are trying to figure it out. So there's a lot of topics that I want to unpack there. We're going to talk about technology, teachers, tech coaches, collaboration, but maybe just to kick things off, Matthew, can you just describe Modesto City Schools, kind of the makeup of the district?
Yeah, Modesto City Schools, we're in the heart of California in the Central Valley. We're about 80 miles south of Sacramento. We're about 80 miles from San Francisco as well, right there in the center of the Central Valley. And we are a school district made up of elementary, middle school, and high school. We have 34 school sites, 22 elementary, 4 junior highs, and 7 high schools. And we have 30,000 students within our school district. And our demographics, just to kind of share, all of our 7 high schools, except 2 of them, are Title I free and reduced lunch.
Got it. So that is a pretty substantial size district, just from, on the Dyknow side and a lot of districts that we're working with. So that's definitely substantial. And I'm, in terms of size and makeup, and I'm curious, just with a district of that size, can both of you maybe give me some ideas on the measures and infrastructures that you had in place prior to COVID-19 to prepare for maybe remote learning, a remote learning environment as you guys are operating in today?
Yeah, we definitely were 1-to-1 in our 7th through 12th grades. So all students had a student device that they were taking home, bringing to school already. They were already used to using in the classroom digital textbooks. We used the LMS Schoology. And so they were used to some of that digital online curriculum in their classrooms. The elementary, TK6, they had a couple digital textbooks, including language arts, but they were doing mostly of it in class with carts that a teacher could check out to have student devices, but they weren't quite 1-to-1. So the TK6, this whole distance learning for the teachers, students, and parents is really new right now.
Oh, and so would you say the 1-to-1 program, just at its core, having the 1-to-1 program in place and up and running, has been critical to the success of what's going on a weekly basis now with Modesto City?
Yeah, the high schools. So. Yeah, I'd agree. The high schools, they've been doing it for 3 years, 1-to-1. The middle school, they're on their 2nd year now. And Scott's actually currently a teacher at one of our high schools. And they've been using the student devices and Schoology for 3 years now. How's it going there, Scott?
I would say it's good. We just started new learning earlier this week, and at our site alone, over 80% of students engaged with the new material that first day back, which is great. And with my own classes, I would say it's closer to 90%. I think out of my 175-ish students, I only had like 6 not, log in and participate that day. So that's really great. And I attest a lot of that to just having access and training on the one-to-one devices. Like it's business as usual, really. We go in, we log into the LMS, access our curriculum, have our instructions on there. The only difference is we're not doing it in person. And if they need to ask us a question, I have office hours, and there's so many ways they can get a hold of me. They can use our LMS, they can use our email, and now they can use Remind as well and chat with me via text.
And I'm curious on that note, Scott, from a teacher to student engagement perspective, what have you found in these weeks has been kind of the number one way students have reached out to you and you've engaged back with students just in terms of feedback? Has it been the office hours, texts, any other chat platform? What are you seeing right now?
I would say the number one way they've reached out to me and communicated with me has been via the LMS. But the deepest connections, and this is something I've just started this week, I'm kind of late to the game on it, is I've adopted our site's policy of contacting one class period and being really in touch with them and making sure that they're just doing okay, doing like a wellness check. And that has proved the most fruitful. So that's kind of an update since we last chatted. But just doing that for one period out of my 5 sections has made a huge difference. Hearing you say that, it's amazing. Like, one of the things I think just from personally that I've been trying to do, because someone did it to me and it meant a lot, was just shooting some people in my network, whether it's a coworker or friends, just shooting them a text and saying, how are you doing? And it's amazing just saying like, how are you doing? Or a wellness check to check in, like how impactful that can be and how much that can mean to the other person on the end. And also how that can really start the right type of conversation that students might have been holding in for a while. So I think I like hearing that, because in my personal life, people doing that to me and me trying to return that to other people in my network, I've seen the right type of conversation started from just an easy wellness check like that. Yeah, it means a lot. I've had coworkers do that and people from my PLN. Actually, right before this call, my buddy Randall Sampson, he checked in. We were on a Zoom call and just sharing what each of our districts are doing. He's over in Ohio, but he works as a consultant and he has clients up and down the East Coast. And so it was really neat to hear what they're doing and to see that some of the good things we're doing, they're doing as well.
That's great. And what I want to dig into too, because the one thing that stood out originally was just the preparation and what was in flight and what had been planned, what was being planned in terms of, training teachers, making sure there being a timeline when new information was going to be shared with students. So can either one of you describe kind of the work that's been done and what's happened so far on the front end to support distance learning since it's been live? Kind of like that week by week synopsis on the breakdown of what's happened so far?
Yeah, early in March, this had been starting to become more of that national topic of social distancing, starting to look at a couple of the school districts and some states at that time started looking at school closures. And at that time, California didn't have in place yet school closures, but our county was talking about, as a county as a whole, as a message, all school districts in our county to do a school closures, looking at the time frame. And originally, it was going to be school closures starting in just about the second week of March there, all the way down to coming back in April 6th. And that's what we were kind of looking at right after Easter, or, that holiday coming up to that. And originally we only had a couple of days. I know at the district level in our PD and coaching, instructional coaching department, we met where we formed different breakout groups or trying to decide like the best ideas. And what it came to was at that moment, the county and our superintendent decided we are going to close on a Thursday. I believe it was March 12th. And so we had 3 days of school that week. And every day leading up to that school closure, we were working on a website to create distance learning resources for parents and students that would get them through March, past our spring break week, and when we would come back in April. And that distance learning website was resources that were self-paced, they could be accessed, they didn't need accounts, and they could be standalone for parents and students to kind of get rolling with. They were structured by grade level and really focused on math and language arts and all the grade levels, with a couple of resources for science and social studies added in there, and computer science. And that was the original plan. Then really seeing that was phase one. Then phase two was looking at, this is probably going to last a lot longer. We're probably not going to be coming back to school. And what phase two was starting to be planned right at that same moment was, let's look at the rest of the weeks until the end of school in May. So we planned out a week of creating tutorial resources, webinars, self-paced videos, self-paced Schoology lesson modules for the teachers. And that was during their spring break week that followed our original school closure. Then the following week, we did teacher training. So teachers were in webinars. They were taking the Schoology self-paced training modules. We had like 5 of those for them to get through. We had videos on our YouTube channel for them to watch and access. So it was a lot of teacher webinars and training. I think we did over 100. We had 4,000 some participants out of 1,500 so teachers. Several of the teachers took more than one webinar. So we were really rolling with the teacher training. In that same week, we're preparing for parent and student tutorials, and that rolled out last week. And then this week, April 13th here, we are all in it. So it's new learning was officially started April 13th. No grading, no attendance, still optional, but new learning can happen now. So this week is just trying it. The teachers, the parents, the students, all trying these new distance learning digital tools. And I think as they start trying it, that we're getting a lot of questions this week from everyone. But I think this is going to start to become more of a routine as they start using the different tools week after week. But we are currently closed for the rest of the school year to the end of May with the school closures and doing distance learning.
Wow. That, I think what you just described is a ton of effort from, I'm sure, a lot of parties involved, but I think that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about being on offense. The structure there and the process that you all are operating in is tremendous, and quite frankly, it's one of a kind from the conversations that I've had so far. So I think that's super awesome. I'm definitely curious to maybe learn, Scott, based on all of what Matthew just described, what's been the biggest impact that's had on you in the teacher role?
So from the teacher role, I think just having access to tools and having the office hours, if you have any questions, or the availability of one-to-one appointments has been huge, because that's how we're differentiating the learning and closing any gaps in learning. And that's how we've been able to distribute 15,000 Chromebooks to these teachers that may or may not have been familiar with that technology and our LMS and their digital curriculum, and get them up and running. I'm really surprised at how many of the elementary teachers are just doing phenomenal things already, recording Flipgrid videos, running conferences like video conferences through Schoology conferences and re-uploading those to the LMS. It's amazing. They've done all of this in a few short weeks.
That's crazy. So yeah, I that's amazing, and that's a very cool story. And we were having a conversation on this podcast with Eric Geis on the East Coast, and he was mentioning he's a technology coach, and he was mentioning, describing teachers as tech comfortable and tech uncomfortable. And I've often thought all the tech uncomfortable teachers and the teachers that might not be used to Chromebooks or having Chromebooks in class, now they're having to rely on those Chromebooks. So it's really cool to hear those stories about people who might have been maybe a little resistant to the technology that are now that have to use it, that are not only using it, but using it exceptionally well.
I was just going to say, I think what's really helped too from both the training perspective and the teaching perspective is having power users, having teachers that are experts with these tools already, helping other teachers. That's how we've been able to cast such a wide net so quickly. We really identified from the get-go in the early stages of this who our power users are, and we brought them on board and utilized their time and their expertise and their willingness to just be great teachers and just kind of expand their roles as teachers and let their peers access them as well.
I love that. Matthew, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think also early on for us, we were very mindful about student privacy, especially minors with webcams. So we started looking at the tools pretty quickly on, knowing that Zoom was not going to be our option. And so we adopted, in Schoology itself had a feature called Schoology Conferences for the enterprise edition of Schoology, which we have. And the Schoology Conferences lets a teacher create a video live conference with their students of that course, but the teacher can control all the microphones and can control web cameras to be off, and only the teacher can see the students. The students can't see each other. So there's a lot of privacy and security options within that tool. And then we looked at what are we using for staff, and really quickly we adopted, when this distance learning and school closure started, we hadn't been using it before, but we adopted Microsoft Teams for staff to communicate with each other, to do their meetings, collaboration, and webinars. And that's really taken off really well. And I think that both those tools from straight on, making sure to know how to use them, training how to use them. And I think those are some really good decisions that kind of helped us now where we're at, especially hearing stories now of just some of these video conferencing tools and some of the things you got to be really protective of.
Yeah, I know the student privacy concept is definitely consistent. That topic, I think, will be talked about more, and I'm looking forward to hopefully talking with more educators about that, because that is a theme that definitely continues to bubble up when we're talking about distance learning. I guess we can give a shout out to Microsoft, like they need a plug for their product. That's definitely Teams I know is everywhere, and it's cool to hear that it's helping you guys communicate more effectively. In terms of just the communication, I'm curious, since teacher tech coach right here, what do you think the ideal workflow is for a teacher and tech coach to collaborate during this time? Is it through a platform like Teams? Is it, hopping on the phone, text? What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, so as a tech coach, I think Scott mentioned some of these things we have in place. So as a tech coach, I'm getting the majority of my communication and questions still from the teachers through email. Then I would say I have a Google Voice number that I have in my signature line of my email. So I would say that's the second most way that they're communicating with me, is just calling me up. So I think they're using some tech tools that they're familiar with. They're familiar with email. They're familiar with making calls. So I think that's the main way they're reaching out. But the third way is we do also use Microsoft Bookings within Office 365, where teachers can book us for 20, 30-minute one-to-one appointments. And so they book us, it goes on our Outlook calendars, but it also creates a Teams meeting for us to join in for that one-to-one. And that's been another really popular way throughout the day that teachers are getting a hold of us.
I would
Go
second that too, from the teacher perspective. I think those that were low tech or no tech beforehand, they're defaulting to the calls, to the emails, and then those that have engaged in tech a little more regularly, they've really taken to Teams, because that's entirely new. That's not something we had in place before this. So in the last 3 weeks, they've learned and adapted, and our PLC meetings, our site meetings, and updates are now all on Teams from the site level, and many of the items that the district is sending out is also duplicated on Teams.
Oh, and I did forget to mention that early on when we created the website, public-facing website for students and parents for distance learning, as we were kind of building up the teacher capacity, our instructional coaches, we have about 25 of them in different grade level subject areas. They really collaborated well together, created a Schoology group called Distance Learning Resources, and it's really organized the folders in that group by grade level and subject area, and they're putting in weekly activities that the teachers can add to their Schoology courses. So there's a lot of things being curated for the teachers as well during this time.
That's amazing, and it's actually a good segue into what I want to talk about next. Scott, I'm curious, I know we touched on this, but I think our audience would certainly benefit from this, but can you talk a little bit about how you're gathering information just in terms of technology and distance learning tips and tricks from the teacher perspective on how to do your job most effectively during this time?
Yeah, so I've really worked to crowdsource and just tap into my national and international PLN to see what's happening in different parts of the world. Like, how are other places doing this? And then kind of self-assessing and comparing, like, okay, they're doing this or we're not doing this, and realizing what I need to do and getting ideas like, okay, this lines up with the way I teach. I can do this. This lines up with what's being required of me by my district. Like, we're required to have office hours set at the same time for consistency, having that regiment kind of built in to create some normalcy for our students. And I think that's why we had such a great turnout this week as they formally came back for new learning. So we had kind of makeup work, refreshers, a lot of practice for both teachers, parents, and students. And now we're actualizing that plan, and so far so good. It's holding up. We're getting some good returns. Even kids with really good grades are opting in. Everybody's really buying in, and I think it has to do with the culture, and that's been supported by my PLN, just having these check-ins, I guess, with teachers from everywhere. Like, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing? How's it affecting you? Asking those questions. And I would say to your listeners, if you don't have a PLN yet, now is definitely the time to get one. If you had one already, keep it going, and you can see the value, because it's added so much to my teaching. I'm able to be dynamic and relevant during this time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have to shout out those types of groups. Even from me as a marketer of software, I have a group, a collective of individuals that do what I do across the country, and we're syncing, jumping on Zoom in the mornings and in the evenings. And it's just so refreshing to learn about whatever industry they're working in, what they're hearing, how they're feeling, what's working, what's not. So definitely shout out to PLNs or other groups. Learning from others in a community setting definitely is impactful, and I would encourage anybody to try to join a PLN, because I think it matters a lot. couple more questions, and we'll wind it down here. I'm curious, just from both your perspectives, what do you think this means for distance learning after we get through all of this? Is distance learning going away? Is it something that's here to stay? What do you think those next steps are when we're thinking about operating remotely?
Yeah, we're already looking at like phase 3. What does this look like next school year? So we're already planning for what this might look like. And there's been different reports. There could be a reoccurrence of it maybe in the winter, but definitely until we hear the governors speak, including our governor in California recently, there needs to be certain things in place before we can kind of come back, for testing. For vaccines. So some of this stuff has to be in place. But even coming back to the school, it definitely has, we see that what the teachers, students, parents are learning with these distance learning tech tools, we've probably advanced in our district in 6 months here, we'll probably advance where we would have been in maybe 5+ years. And so coming back to the classroom, we have 22 elementary schools that we weren't really using many of the tech tools, and Scott was mentioning them, that now the parents, students, and the teachers are using it. We have TK2 teachers never even using these tools before, learning all of this. The students are, and they're really taking this in really well. We're really amazed and proud of the teachers and all the hard work they're doing. But this just means there could be meaningful, purposeful tech tools to help student learning that we can really engage with more than we could before this all happened, because everyone's getting involved with it right now.
And I think from the teacher side too, there's a big push and a widespread agreement that we do need to regularly have digital curriculum available and use it so that we're well versed in it, just in case something like this happens again, or if we need to do it again in the fall or in the winter, like Matthew was saying, because we just don't know at this point. And so I think everybody's finally on board, and I'm really thankful that folks everywhere are really seeing the value of digital and distance learning.
Definitely. And I think, at the end of the day, it really emphasizes technology and the importance of innovation and technology and supporting K-12 when we're remote or when we're in the classroom. So from my perspective, I think although this is a tough time, that's the cool part about it. We're able to try technology, get people comfortable with technology, and see where it'll take learning moving forward. Final question. I'm just curious from your guys' ends, what advice do you think you have, or do you have for any, teachers or tech coaches that are, in the middle of distance learning right now and still maybe not 100% comfortable, but trying to figure things out?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, get online and find resources. Tap into these different areas of education, across social media. If you're new to social media, I recommend starting with one platform. And if you're not sure which one, I would recommend Twitter. It's going to be based upon your preference. And I really recommend too that you create a professional one. Don't get so personal on social media when it comes to getting stuff for the field. Keep it professional, just talk about professional things, and that'll make sure you get high quality content. And then make sure you're seeking out these higher end professionals in the field, and don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always amazed at how these influential educators make themselves accessible. So I'm able to have a chat with Alice Keeler or Matt Miller or Catlin Tucker, some of these folks that we've had on the show, and they're great. Just like any good educator, they're in the field to bring out the best in others and to help others achieve more. And they're so giving of their time and their resources. And sometimes it just takes you, the end user, reaching out and letting them know that there's a need that they can help fill.
Yeah, and I also see for a tech coach, really sharing, communicating ways that teachers can reach out to you, having that pathway, if it's email, if you're doing webinars, if you're doing video conference meetups, if you're going to have some way for them to communicate with you by phone, having that all kind of planned out, really supporting, training, guiding those all-star tech teachers from the school sites that we've just seen have really risen up. I think Scott mentioned that earlier, and they've really helped us out a lot, supporting their own teachers at their own sites, being more local. And then I have been amazed, I keep going back to our TK2 teachers, but they're really collaborating, helping each other out, trying things together. And I've been really impressed with even the local PLNs, even with the teachers from their grade levels and school sites coming together to help each other out as well.
I was just going to add one more thing to that. I think it's really important to, whether you're a tech coach or a teacher, so I'm kind of doing both right now, to set boundaries for your time. So to also have you be regimented and find something that works, especially if you have a family or other things going on at home, spouse that's working different hours. Find what works for you, but have those set times in which you respond to messages and communicate and make yourself available online so that you're not burning yourself out.
Yeah, Scott and I have this conversation. I think we are working harder being at home, and it's a little harder to know when to stop because you're already at home. And I think that's really good advice that Scott's giving, because I know for me, I need to take that advice to heart, and it's hard for me to stop.
That makes three of us. I am trying to separate church and state, if you will, and sometimes they blend together, unfortunately, just because it's the laptop's always on, and and I think building routines into your day-to-day, and when you're going to respond, when you're going to have family time, when you're going to look out for your mental and physical health, whether it's, going for a walk or whatever it is, that's super important. I think a good note to close this out on. Definitely want you guys to get a chance to plug the podcast. Where can people find you? Where are you at online? What can people expect maybe when they tune in to TNT EdTech?
Well, on Twitter, you can find me at Mr. Noons Teach. You can find the podcast on Twitter at TNT EdTech. And Matthew, do you want to give your handle and the website?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Matt EdTech Coach. And you can visit us at tntedtech.com. And TNT stands for Teacher and Tech Coach. But Scott, soon it will be
Tech Coach and Tech Coach.
That's right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm be curious if it's the same dynamic and if it will be different based on the role change. I'm expecting more of the same.
Yeah. I think so. I don't want to lose touch with the classroom.
Yeah, and I think it will as well.
That's awesome. Guys, this was super helpful. I learned a ton. Hopefully everybody out there did too. So much fun to connect with you guys always. Definitely listeners, check out their podcast, give them feedback, connect with them on Twitter, give us feedback on the episode. Let us know what you want to hear coming up soon. And most importantly, everybody out there, be safe. And thanks so much.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Brett.